Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Taekook, they never built a house, but it was always a home. Not all stories are written with the intention of being read. Some just hang in the air like dust dancing in the morning light, visible only to eyes that stop to notice. That's how Taekook lives, not in sound but in echo. Not in an embrace but in a distance that never feels far. Kim Taehyung and Jungkook. Two names that run like two lines on an old map, sometimes across, sometimes parallel, but always heading in the same direction, each other. They were never a fairy tale. They were footnotes in a history that was never written but always echoed. Their relationship wasn't a love story with chapters, conflicts, and resolutions. It was a silent symphony that echoed through empty spaces. There were no "I love yous" announced, but there was a presence that spoke deeper than any declaration. Once upon a time, in the middle of the night when the world was still asleep, the practice room bore witness to two souls who didn't need voices to understand each other. Taehyung sat playing a melody without a title. Jungkook listened, not with his ears but with his chest. Neither asked questions, but the answers were always found in the silence they shared. Taekook didn't shine brightly. They burned softly. Like fireflies in the woods, not to be shown off, but to be found by those lost and searching for direction. When the camera panned to them, the world saw two smiling idols. But anyone who really looked knew that the split-second blink was no accident. That there was a language that was never taught, but they both spoke it fluently. Taehyung knew when to be quiet, not because he didn't care, but because his silence was a space where Jungkook could breathe. Jungkook knew when to come closer, not to save, but to make sure that neither fell alone. They weren't secrets, but they weren't public stories either. They were the empty spaces between the lines. A place where meaning was found, not given. And when the world asked, what is their relationship really? The answer wasn't in words, but in the way they stood side by side without holding each other, yet still strengthening each other. In the way they waited for each other, even when no one promised to come. Taekook didn't sell their story. They kept it like a letter written and buried under the roots of a tree. Not to be found, but to grow into something that lives silently. When Taehyung looked fragile in the crowd, Jungkook didn't lift him up in a big hug. He just stared at him, long, honest, knowing. And in that gaze, there was a small world that belonged only to them. They weren't always okay. They fought. They were silent for days. But like the sea and the beach, they always came back. Because it wasn't on the promises they stood for, but on the habit of choosing each other, again and again and again. Taekook couldn't be explained. They could be unreal or too real for this world. Like a shadow that couldn't be touched. Like a lullaby that had no lyrics, but somehow made you feel calm. Because home isn't a place with walls and lights. Home is someone who makes you feel like you don't have to pretend to be loved. And in the silence that needs no proof, that's where Taekook stands, unseen but never absent. They're not legends. They're possibilities. They're not the end of the story. They're questions that never need answers. Taekook is home, not because they built it, but because they never left. And time goes on. Taehyung stares at the night sky from behind the hotel window, far from the stage, far from the spotlight, far from anyone but himself. But there, in the silence that answers nothing, he hears familiar footsteps. Not loud, not sudden, just enough to let him know he is not alone. Jungkook comes without a sound. Just a bottle of water and a small smile that does not try to fix anything. Because he knows some wounds do not need medicine, they only need witnesses. And that night, he became a witness to the unspoken fatigue. The two of them sit. Not across from each other. Not side by side. But close enough to share the silence. And as usual, nothing begins. Nothing ends. But both of them know that when the world shakes them from the outside, each other is the center that remains still. Not moving. Not collapsing. Just there. In their busy schedules and endless flights, they often pretend not to search. But they always find. Like a playlist playing silently in the practice room, where one of Taehyung's favorite songs suddenly plays, and Jungkook just stares at the mirror with a small smile. Because sometimes love is unannounced attention. Love is knowing body language that changes 1 degree. It is hearing silence that sounds foreign. It is knowing when to hold on even if the other doesn't ask. In interviews, they always answer carefully. Words are chosen like stepping stones in a fast-flowing river. But their gazes? It has never learned to lie. And they don't need to explain, because they have long known that the most honest relationships can never be summarized in sentences. Taekook is poetry in human form. Not poetry written with a pen, but with time. With loss. With rediscovery. In a way that is not dramatic but deep, so deep that it can't be reached by anyone but the two of them. Sometimes, Taehyung speaks to the world through his paintings. Jungkook speaks through songs. But in their works there are always faint traces of each other, in colors that are not mentioned, in tones that are never asked. And maybe, when the world is tired of writing perfect love stories, Taekook is there to remind us that love doesn't have to be a form. It can be a scent. It can be the time that passes without you realizing when someone is next to you. It can be footsteps that always unconsciously lead to the same place. They may never confess. But they also never stop giving signs. Because not all stories need to be told. Some are felt enough, sincerely, deeply, and forever silent. And in the end, when all the spotlights are off and the last song is finished, there will be one place that never changes, the place where they found each other again, even when the world has forgotten. Because true love doesn't always have a stage. But it always has a place. A place where Taehyung and Jungkook remain a story that never ends. A place where just one presence is enough to make the world feel whole again. And Taekook will always be home. Not because they built it, but because they never tire of returning. And one day the stage will turn off. The cheers will fade and the screen will slowly close. Their names may still be remembered, as legends, as history, as indelible traces. But that's not what they'll remember. What will remain in their hearts are the little things. The laughter that erupted late at night. Your shoulder that was always there without being asked. And the silence that never felt empty when we sat together. In a world that kept asking for answers. They chose to be questions that never needed to be answered. Among the millions of lights that once shone on them, there was one light that never went out, the presence of each other. Taehyung might walk down a lonely path, painting a sun that never rose, singing a song without lyrics that only one person could ever understand. Jungkook might stand on stage one night, looking out into the audience. And suddenly his heart will still, because not everyone there was the one he was looking for. They will grow. They will change. Time will pull them apart, like a slow but steady current. But even when their maps become tangled, there will always be a faint line connecting the starting point to the returning point. And when the world grows too quiet, there will be nights when one of them hears a familiar song and recognizes the humming like their own heartbeat. He will smile, close his eyes, and know without a doubt he is coming home. Because home isn't always a place. Sometimes home is a person. Someone who knows the worst of you and stays. Someone who, even in leaving, always leaves room for you to return. Taekook isn't a story that will be told in the history books. But if you've ever loved someone in silence, if you've ever longed for someone who never really left, you'll understand that they never went anywhere. They just moved to a quieter place inside our chests. And whenever we think of the word home, their faces come to mind first. Because in the end, it's not about how often they're together. It's about how they're never truly alone. Taekook is home. Not because they built it, but because they unconsciously have always been each other. A place to come home to, a place to stay, a place where love lives and never leaves.
Today's gonna be a good day, wake up. Today's gonna be a good day, wake up. Today's gonna be a good day.